All right, everybody. So, yeah, welcome to another text exploration. This is the Spacious Path to Freedom Union of Mahāmudrā and Dzogchen. When you recognize awareness as the nature of your mind, you're no longer confined into the thoughts and into the emotions or even the body, because this purely present awareness permeates everything. You can start to familiarize with that part of your mind. And at first, it's very straightforward. We're familiarizing with awareness. But as we do that, the mystery, the ineffability starts to reveal itself. Especially if you're incorporating Togyal, that may be expedited as this Dang and Ropa and Tal, the three manifestations of energy, start to display themselves. And within that, letting be, we're including our environment, which is pretty radical. Although it's the fourth foundation of mindfulness, I feel like the environment itself gets neglected for an overemphasis on the body and the emptiness of self and all of our thoughts and basically the ropa as it's known in Tibet. And I humbly describe these three elements that, that they have in Dzogchen to describe Tuji in Tibetan. It's the energy, everything, all reality. So I don't know if I need to go in that. Dung is essentially your awareness, like a mirror, and within that you have the so-called internal and external plays of the mind, the energy of the mind. So the internal stuff would all be ropa, and then the external stuff would be tal. And according to Namki Norbu, and some Togyal approaches, that's how they're broken down. And so you're letting all that be. And when you're resting in that seat, you cannot do this if you're just in your thoughts and you've never seen awareness. You don't even know there is awareness. I mean, you've been born into it and you will die within it. So it's unavoidable. It's kind of it holds you just like a child doesn't know that it's in the mother's arms. You don't know you're being held within the awareness until you recognize it. It's always been here. It's timeless. It is considered the fourth time. And so that's Mahāmudrā, when we rest in that great perfection, as it's known. Great completion, that's how Dzogchen gets translated. And your awakening, your enlightenment is here now. We start to make this reality very mundane, but it's actually very magical. And we get caught in the movement of our mind, you see? And the movement of our mind creates barriers. It creates moving walls, living walls that blockade the oneness, the natural oneness here. And the pure presence. Okay, so I'll go into the reading here. It says ideation of the past doesn't need anything else to release it, for it is released in its own place and is self-liberating. There is an interval following past ideation and future ideation. Do not try to modify or contaminate this interim by altering it or structuring in any way. In this moment of awareness, there is no conventional reality. It is utterly free of conceptual elaboration or structuring. I've already elaborated on how important these lines are, but uh, they're hitting us again with some pretty powerful stuff here. And don't try to modify or contaminate anything. No need to alter or structure anything. So, as mentioned earlier, these moments provide you with the opportunity to realize the nature of awareness. The interval after you have fallen asleep and before you begin dreaming. The interval after you have stopped dreaming and before you wake up. And the interval following the passing of one conceptualization and before the next. And so we have the hypnagogic state there and the hypnopompic state there. Um, Dream yoga can be such a great complement to Dzogchen. Your mind does a lot of interesting things. It gives you a lot of, it reveals a lot of information, so to speak, when you're dreaming, when you're sleeping. In that point, right where you're falling asleep, you can start to access this lucid aspect of your mind. And so it's almost like you're getting pointing out instructions again, but now pointing out to the very subtle and lucid aspect of the mind. You see, when we rest here and all this gross, let's say there's a gradient that goes from subtle to gross, all right? So coarse at the top. And these are very obvious thoughts like, I love dogs. Um, I need to get a great job and do wonderful. These are thoughts that you have that you can see. And then there are more subtle thoughts like, no, I don't like that very much. You know, a little more quiet narrator. And then you have the very lucid part of the mind. It's a kind of autopilot almost. Um, there are intelligences here that are beating our heart and digesting food and keeping the circulatory systems moving and all that. So here, the coarse mind, as you abide in effortless abiding, the coarse mind starts to funnel down in a sense, almost like a sand clock that has been turned upside down. It funnels from being all in your head and kind of all up here, and even your emotional energy that's in your neck and shoulders starts to funnel down into that lucid aspect and mingle back with it, like space meeting space. And then when you abide in the lucid aspect of your mind, the whole mind, that's when the reference point starts to go away. This conditioned self starts to naturally liberate within that, and especially within the luminosity of your mind. The body starts to be revealed as luminosity, as awareness penetrates every cell, okay? It penetrates all the particles down to every wave. And that's how it's so powerful. It can uproot affliction or confusion anywhere it's hiding. And what is confusion but energy knots? You know, at the very basis of this whole experience, it's energy. It's vibrated one way or the other. You see? And it gets layered, it gets structured. So these are important states. You know, they talk about in between thoughts. You can notice this sort of pure presence. Um, at the bottom of your breath, if you inhale, exhale, rest in that space before you inhale again, right? You can kind of access. Uh, if you bring the awareness behind the eyes and above the head, mingle with space, bring it behind you, to the left of you, to the right. You see, pure presence within all the objects in the room. Your awareness pervading my voice. Yeah, so, and then when you drift off into sleep, of course, resting in this awareness is the one thing that's always going to be there through that transition from the hypnagogic state into deep sleep. The awareness is going to be there. And then when you're in that stupor, in that deep sleep, this is a great way to test your awareness. You know, how strong is your awareness? Do you really feel like you're in that dream? Or is there a sense of you kind of witnessing the dream? And that's when you know you're going to be free in the bardo, for example, which is another time you can recognize awareness. This is how important it is, everybody. They they make all these preparations so you can recognize awareness in the bardo as you die, but you have recognized it here while you're alive. And if you haven't recognized it yet, then get to the bottom of it. You have a connection with Dzogchen. Don't mess around. We're not really living in a world where we can mess around. Many beings are suffering right now in this presence. And we get so consumed in our inner rituals and all these patterns that are constantly just replaying every week, every day. Same shit. So when are we going to come home again? We're going to get forced to come home? You know? So there are all these moments, these precious moments where you can enter into your liberated mind. And I'm surprised we still have these teachings and this information. It's so powerful, but not so many will utilize. Okay, so each of these instances provides an opportunity to realize the nature of awareness. This gap, or interval, is like the space seen in a gap between two cloud banks. The space you see is not a narrow sliver of space. In fact, this space is infinite, but you see it through a very narrow sliver. Don't mistake the borders for the reality that lies between the borders. That's actually a great metaphor, in my opinion. When you witness the sky in between the clouds, it may seem like a little sliver of the sky, but you're really witnessing the totality of what's holding those clouds. Just like that, when you get your little glimpse during pointing out, then it may seem like a sliver, but you have just seen in between the clouds of your own proliferation, your own ideation and distraction. For a moment, it stopped and you saw something there, the great sky that holds everything. So the empty essence of awareness is not a mere vacuity. The very nature of that emptiness is luminosity or clarity and pervasive, illuminating compassion. That's what I was just mentioning with the dung, which would be the awareness aspect. Um, Tal and Ropa can be associated with the luminosity and clarity aspect. This emptiness displays itself in the five sensory consciousnesses and in mental consciousness. Wow, we have the Hivadra Tantra being quoted too in here, and the Guhya Samaja. Very good. That's why I chose this text and why we can actually stay with it for a little bit, because it's very dynamic and versatile, and it's going to give you something fresh all the time from these primary sources. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So it says, because one is not meditating with the mind, one meditates on the whole world. Meditating even with knowledge of all phenomena is not meditation. Oh man, I just I have these moments. Isn't that what I just said today, everybody? I say what makes this special, Dzogchen, is that we include the whole world. I've said it before. All appearances are whole reality. Remember I was talking about the four foundations of mindfulness? I feel like these scriptures talk to me sometimes in very strange ways. Um, I get these goosebumps when I read it. It's like, wow, something going on. Interesting. Okay. So the Guhya Samajas Tantra states, in the absence of real phenomenon, there is no meditation. The act of meditating is not meditation. Thus, since phenomena are unreal, meditation is without an objective referent. The great Brahmin Saraha says, If you realize this mind itself, which is tied up in knots, no doubt it will be freed. Due to what phenomenon is it bound in wait, due to what phenomenon is it bound in stupidity? Why can't they just say, to what phenomenon is it bound in stupidity? All right, it's okay. So, due to which phenomenon is it bound in stupidity? The wise are completely liberated from that. Yeah, and this goes really hand in hand too with our practice lately with appearances and noticing consciousness with surface compared to consciousness without surface. I really love the original sutras and the canons on consciousness without surface because our mind is like that. It's like a great sun, and the rays get attached to all these different things. So we get attached to inner things like our past, ideas of the future, ideas of the what's going on right now, in the present. We get consumed in those, and we layer them and structure them and construct them into proliferation and conceptualization. So not only that, we get attached. Our mind light, our mind rays, picks appearances like, oh, you see an attractive person or some food or something. Your mind grabs that and then creates thoughts about it. So the ropa aspect and the tal aspect are getting glued together and then getting held by the conditioned self, the doing of the selfing. So we really bind ourselves up in the knots of this stuff. And all appearances that present themselves to you um, to you are like flames spreading in a forest. Behave in accordance with the root of the mind, which is emptiness. Yeah, all appearances that present themselves to you are like flames spreading in a forest. Yeah, remember the three modes of liberation. So when you're resting in pure presence and a thought comes, you've seen these thoughts grab you before, and they put you in a mood, and they captivate you for the entire day, even throughout the night. And they're very tempting because they're like old friends that you hang out with, even though they have problems, right? So um, we let this thought in, and then we babysit it, we take care of it, and we elaborate on it, and it really starts to, um, like a wildfire, go through our whole state of consciousness and captivate us. So, like a thief entering an empty house, that thought comes, like, oh, this day is horrible, or whatever thought it, usually comes in a habitual manner. It comes to grab you, but you let it come and go. There's no need to feed that thought anything, right? So the Hivadra Tantra states, by not knowing that which entraps the world and that which liberates us from bondage, the world is unfree, and by disregarding that, siddhis are not attained. Ah, Hivadra Tantra, wonderful. Um, yeah, we get really attached to this life too, and we try to build into this life that's so permanent and fleeting, and we get so serious about this life. Would you try to build a home inside of an airport? You know, this is really like a giant airport. We're all just here, just going on to the next place. We're here for a little while. Um, there's no need to really set up shop in such a serious, profound way. So anyway, it says the Hivadra also says the world is entrapped due to attachment and is liberated due to attachment itself. The inverted meditation is unknown by non-Buddhists or non-Dharma practitioners. I would say non-authentic Dharma practitioners, because this truth isn't necessarily limited to Buddhists, as we've gone over many times. So anyway, the world is entrapped due to attachment, and it is liberated due to attachment itself. Yes. I hope you understand the paradox there. So normally attachment gives rise to bondage, but if you have realized the nature of awareness, attachment can lead to freedom from bondage. This entails an inverted meditation because there is no grasping onto the attachment. Although many types of meditation do entail grasping, quintessential meditation is without grasping. The emphasis is this meditation on the nature of the mind is non-grasping and non-conceptual proliferation. I don't know if there's a such thing as non-conceptual proliferation. Usually proliferation is conceptual. Yeah, attachment is probably going to go hand in hand with this shimpa, with this stickiness aspect, the hooking into things. So I suppose you could enjoy the flavor of something without that grasping, without that attachment. So it's not necessarily limited to likes and dislikes, maybe. The question was, is attachment liking and disliking? I think liking and disliking is attachment and aversion when there's grasping involved. So, but there are many ways attachment can lead to freedom from attachment in that paradox. I don't know if I need to go into that, but it looks like they're going into it. So it says, although many types of meditation do entail grasping, yep. So the emphasis in this meditation on the nature of mind is non-grasping and non-conceptual proliferation, whatever that is. So this is one mode of practice. Indeed, within Buddhism, other legitimate forms of practice do entail conceptual grasping, in which you work with and modify your mind. But that is not done in this practice, which is why in the earlier section that we were reading, where he was talking about using ideation to look at the body, that's why I said not in this approach. Other approaches, yeah, you might use ideation to contemplate emptiness, and all types of analytical meditations exist out there. But this specific text is non-analytical. It is free from ideation. So, but that is not done in this practice. In the stage of generation practice, you use your conceptual mind to generate your body as your chosen deity. Thus, experience is transmuted by the use of conceptual grasping. Similarly, practices in which the vital energies are directed through the channels, talung, entail grasping. That would be the eighth dhyana, associated with the completion stage from my understanding. But you also have all the yoga you could ever imagine is in there. I'm telling you, everything that you see out there in the yoga world um, is essentially warm-ups for what you see in Talung, which is one of the most amazing experiences, but also the hardest experiences I've ever had. A Talung retreat. People who have been on those Talung retreats or witnessed them, they know it is hard on the body. You have to remember these very complex yoga cycles, and you only have one night to remember them. Then you have to do them in front of the teacher the next day, and they keep getting longer and longer and longer throughout the month. Oh, it is something. And then at the end, you have to perform everything in front of the teachers. And if you're kind of further along, you can do the drying the clothes in the cold to show that you can activate your body heat and things like that. So pretty intense stuff, which for me leads naturally, though, into Koryu Rushin and various semzens for your preliminary practices for Dzogchen. So you're essentially really clearing not just your mind, but your body, and preparing it for the awareness practice. That's how special this awareness practice is. All this stuff comes before it to ripen you. And that's why some people do fall off. They can't really handle it because they need more of those knots to clear out before they can really embrace the view. But the view unties knots very quickly. So it only takes a little bit. You don't have to have a whole giant background to embrace Dzogchen and utilize it. If you have trust, devotion is actually the number one working ingredient over all others. That means yoga, analysis, studies, everything, devotion. If you trust the teachers, if you trust your spiritual friends, so to speak, then you don't even need to read a single sutra. And devotion has been known to be a main ingredient for the Tibetans, for example, who didn't really, many of the lay people didn't really study the sutras and all the philosophy and everything. They just trusted the teachers. So even the leap over stage of Atiyoga practice entails specific postures and gazes which carry a vestige of conceptual grasping. Did I pronounce that right? Vestige? Yeah? Okay. All right. Do you guys realize this line? I mean, maybe I had it from all the teachings I've gotten in the past, but this is what I try to tell everybody. I can't believe we've actually found a source, because this is what I try to tell people. For some reason, they think Togyao is so much more advanced than Trekcho. It says here, you know what leap over stage is, right? Anybody know what leap over stage means? Yeah. And last week, I told you all this, that in my humble opinion, this is still effort based. So it's preparing you. Um, awesome. I'm so happy we have this on record because this is exactly right. And people will prioritize these postures, these three postures, as some kind of like apex practice. It's not, it's a preliminary practice. And by the way, let me also say, Holiness Pena Rinpoche, very wise, put them in the retreats. He put these Togyal postures before Trekcho. Whereas everywhere else, like in Dujum Lingpa approaches, you'll see Trekcho coming before Togyal, and then Togyal being so secret that nobody ever knows what's going on anyway. So this is awesome. My apologies for getting caught up here a little bit. This really backs up my point of view so much. Or like the advice I give, I don't want to be reckless when I give advice. Okay, I want to be very thorough and careful when I give you all advice with this stuff. And I'm just very happy that it says it here in one sentence explicitly. So that means that once you see the bindus, you're really good to go. You know, once you can rest here in this clear light awareness, in that dang, the clear light aspect of your mind, um, start to allow all appearances to be within that awareness. It's great if you want to pull rays to kind of really point yourself to it. I think that's fine, but do not prioritize pulling rays over effortless abiding. That would be a deep mistake, in my opinion. Yeah, the steps in which something needs to be done, that seems to be kind of inherent to the Dharma path. We always want steps. But there are phases that we go through, just like the body when it's growing and things like that. So Doug asks, what's pulling rays? So in the Togyal teachings, you can use three sources. The first is two sources, so there's actually four sources. You can use the sun and the moon. The moon is so amazing to just rest here. The moon's right here right now, actually. Uh, you can use the sun and the moon. You can use a candle, or you can use sky gazing at the empty blue sky. And so when you're doing that, well, with the sky, the rays may not be so obvious to you. So mainly with the candle, the sun, and the moon. The moon is a nice soft way to do this, but basically you don't look directly at it, kind of away from it, and you squint your eyes, and then a light ray will come off of it, and you may already see the rays. And one can also use, I've seen people use cell phone flashlights, but that's ridiculous in my opinion. Um, but if you're using the poses and you're looking down, like for the Nirmanakaya Rishi pose, you're looking down, then you can use a little candle right there, or maybe a mirror of the moon, reflecting the moon or the sun. You can put a mirror right there, and then squint your eyes, pull the rays, and within those rays, you will see little moving dots, usually white dots. Sometimes they're rainbow dots, um, and it kind of goes from there. Okay. So very cool that Togyo is being mentioned here too. I went over the three postures and the three gazes and how they correspond with the kayas. I went over that last week. And we do have a Togyo video if you want to check that out. Like and subscribe. Mash that button down. Okay. So let's get back to it here. However, in this practice, dispense with all conceptual elaboration and rest in the unmediated nature of awareness itself. That's what I teach. Anytime there's a question about that, uh, do I give empowerments? Do I teach generation completion stage? I've never really even been interested in giving empowerments or teaching these visualization practices. Um, this group has been around for over 11 years. So I used to teach shamatha and vipassana. I used to teach a lot of various meditation techniques according to the sutras. I used to also help guide through the jhanas and through the stages of shamatha and things like that. But now, after Lama Karma Dorje asked me to teach people meditation, he didn't really know that I had the online group, and he asked me, and he was sending people to me here on the mesa, and so that's when I really got the motivation, and I said, you know what, I'm just because Kenshin Sewan Gyatso and Tenzin Norgay, they told me to teach what I experienced, what I realized in my own experience, and then Karma Dorje kind of put the cherry on top and said, go do this, and so that's why really for me, I'm allowed, in my opinion, I've given myself permission, so to speak, to present it like this with the four main phases. Um, well, that's what I'm getting at. Doug asked, do I need Nundro? And really, I leave whatever you've been through to get to this point today, to meet with this Dzogchen presentation, I leave that as your Nundro. Okay? That's your preliminary practice. Maybe you were part of a Pure Land tradition. Maybe you're part of Zen tradition. Maybe you were a Christian mystic or paganism, Stoicism. I don't know. Anything could have been your Nundro. And these days, it's called the dark times, right? So I've seen too many people. Now, you got to understand, I've been around Vajrayana Buddhism since I was a kid. I've seen people get caught up in these Nundro practices for many, many years, and then also never really hear about the awareness practice. And this includes people that I care about, all right, seeing them just for years. And then they get so ingrained into the tantric aspects, into the Vajrayana aspect, that it's very difficult for them to come out of that into the simplicity of Dzogchen. So a lot of times, people, I feel like, are resonating with these teachings and they haven't done Nundro, and that's almost a benefit for them. So it could really go either way. If you have a good guide and you're doing Nundro, then I'm sure it will complement you. But as far as I'm concerned, whatever you've been through in your life is your Nundro. And this can, many of us are here as a matter of necessity. We're not just stopping by like a hotel. Like, we want to be free. We need to get out of the suffering. And so that's why some of us really, there's no turning back. We take this with a lot of sincerity. And that's why when somebody tries to come around just playing around, playing games, there's a stark contrast there. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I think we can stop here. It says, however, in this practice, dispense with all conceptual elaboration. It says dispense with the Togyo postures and the contrived gazing and trying to pull rays and trying to see things. That's wonderful as a sort of introduction to the nature of the Dharmadhatu, but in my opinion, it could be a great hindrance as well, and it also gets so mystified and spectacularized and glamorized. So it's kind of silly. The quiescence of this is to recognize the nature of awareness of the moment. Very beautiful. And we have four phases in this group, four main phases that you go through. You recognize the nature of mind, awareness, and we can verify that. We have ways of validating that you've recognized the nature of mind. This is a very specific thing. It's not just something that maybe I did, maybe I didn't. They're little cues. And in some cases, I've seen people talk themselves out of this pretty substantially. In those cases, what can I do, really? I cannot really help somebody who's talking themselves out of it consistently. That's because you don't have enough shamatha background, you don't have enough mantra background, and so your mind is just too convincing. Your conditioned mind is too convincing for Dzogchen. It won't allow you to have Dzogchen because you keep believing it. Yeah. So once you recognize the nature of mind, the second phase is to familiarize with it. These groups, the way they're set up, it's high-tech Dharma. You can come here anytime. There are no rules about your attendance. Your diligence reflects the degree of your realization. If you're only here like once a month, then you're going to drag along. This is going to take you a lot longer. If you come here frequently, it could last a month. You could be in the view within a month. They have specifically listed that in the scriptures, in the text. We've seen that several times. 1 month, right? So it really depends on you, your willingness, how much you still like that steak, as we hear about in the Matrix movie, right? How much you still like samsara. That'll be equivalent to the time that you spend being stuck. All right, so I think I pretty much covered everything here. It's really wonderful. And well, I said the first stage is to recognize nature mind. Second, familiarize with that nature mind, or Tulku Organ Rinpoche says, sustain the recognition. And then the third, now that you're familiar enough, awareness is in the forefront. It's there all day for you. You're drinking water, you're brushing your teeth, you're using the bathroom, awareness is there. It's prominent. Okay? And so that's the third phase, where you do effortless abiding. Just like Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni, Guru Padmasambhava, they didn't need to do anything. They just walked around and talked to people. They weren't trying to hold a state of awakening. You don't hold this state. This is pure, uncontrived, relaxed into your pure being. And you can talk, you can be a person. It's okay to be a person. You see, you can still eat food, despite what some of these crazy yogis do. And then the fourth, and this corresponds with the four visions of Togya, too, for those who are into that. The fourth is pure liberation. You're not really effortless abiding. There's no more karma exhausting. The thing about effortless abiding and awareness is that your karma is exhausting. Ramana Maharshi said, for example, I don't do anything now except let my karma exhaust. So this is what's happening. One way or another, that's what's happening. But for awareness holders, they're cutting at the conditioned self, the root of the whole thing. So that's why you can have freedom in one lifetime, or it's guaranteed in the bardo. Guaranteed freedom, only $19.99, right in the bardo. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Yeah, Yeshi and all the friends here today that are holding up this sort of dharma. Yeah, very great.